Welcome, Andrew. It's great to see you, and thanks so much for joining us on our Leaders Who Care series. And first of all, shout out. We got a bunch of mutual friends as usual, but certainly my partner Ed Martin, Daniela Tabo, who we both know, and so on. And so shout out to them. And it's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And it's going to be greater because we're going to have some fun. So, can you? Here's the key word: briefly introduce yourself. We can do the business stuff in a second, but who you are, your family, where you're from, where are you now, something you've never told anybody that this might be the time you want to tell somebody. And you can do it with a little bit of English, un petit peu de français, et un pouco in Portuguese. You speak Portuguese too, right?
French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Yeah.
There you go. So tell us a little bit about who's Andrew.
So my name is Andrew Mack. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am a kind of a serial social entrepreneur is probably the best way I would describe myself at this point in time. Big soccer fan, love to play music. One of the things you could see in the background is a bass that I got. I taught myself how to play the bass in COVID, and then this is a four-string tenor guitar.
Wow.
I'm a big traveler. I've spent a bunch of time around the world. I think I've probably at this point been to right around 100 countries, worked in probably 75 or 80 of them. And, I think at heart, connector and adventurer, someone who really wants to get out and to, to make connections with people around the world. It's just kind of who I've always been.
Yeah, eat the food, hear the language, really feel it, right?
Yeah, j'ai travaillé avec MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, en Zambie. Trabalhava pouquinho com o Banco Mundial, trabalhando con Angola. He pasado un montón de tiempo trabajando en América Latina, en Colombia, en lo cual tenemos un equipo. I've worked a lot of great places, and it's one of the things that really has defined me is these wonderful networks of friends that I've developed around the world.
Well, I really admire that. First of all, the commitment to learn the language, and even though we're heading into tech world where it's supposed to get easier, you'll hear somebody in your language, whatnot. But there's nothing like really getting the culture by knowing the language and where it all is derived from. So, yeah, I really respect that, and it's great stuff that you do that. I'd like to know what were you like as a kid or a teenager. Did you eat your veggies? Did you feed them to your dog under the table? Did you read a lot about history? Were you playing soccer? What were you?
So let's see. Did I eat my veggies? Not so much. I mean, the vegetables in the 1970s in Ohio, it was a blanch and boil kind of situation. I wish I knew then what I know now about the joys of broccoli and Brussels sprouts. Right?
Absolutely.
One of the great innovations of COVID was the air fryer, right? And we make all kinds of stuff. And Mike, it's great. My boys both love veggies, and they're really good eaters. So I played all kinds of sports. I played a lot of different kinds of sports because I went to a small high school and college. So soccer, U.S. football, baseball, tennis, ran track. When I was in college, rugby, crew, and ultimate frisbee, among other things. So those are just the interscholastic ones. I think there are probably some more. A lover of all, master of none, with the exception of swimming. I was a really good swimmer when I was a kid. Went to the Junior Olympics when I was 8. So wow. I know what it's like to compete at a high level, and that was good. I think it was good lessons for life.
I was just gonna say that I do a lot of sports analogies, and there's so much, and it's actually great you did a lot of sports because aside from using different muscles, physically it's good too. There's so much we can learn in so many ways from sports.
I think it's really, really important, and I think it's one of the things that we're always that I think we miss sometimes as adults is the that kind of space to play together, and the sense of commitment that you have, where it is on the one hand really a passion commitment, and on the other hand it's not a it's not a work commitment, it's not a money commitment. There are things on the line that are outside of the dollars and cents kind of world, which I think is really important. I think we miss it sometimes as adults, especially as adult guys. I do a lot of soccer still. I do a lot of biking still. I play a lot of tennis still. So, get out and about.
That's awesome. It's a brilliant point that we are missing the space to play together and that camaraderie and everything. And I'm going to actually think more about that because it's so true to our well-being overall, actually. So great point. Tell us about your journey. I mean, you started studying history, political science, then international relations and economics. First of all, what was the motivation to take those majors? And then did it accidentally or on purpose lead to large organizations like the World Bank?
So, yeah, it's good. I've always had a penchant for history. I come from a Jewish family of storytellers, and so getting connected to the history, getting connected to the story has been a lot of fun. I found myself early gravitating toward it. I think and then I got really into Model United Nations, became the National Model United Nations champion. So I would learn about all these different countries, what was going on with them, what were their interests, how to explain their perspectives. And I chose Amherst in part, Amherst College as the place I wanted to go, partly because it was really hard to get into, and partly because they had an amazing history program. Henry Steele Commager and Gordon Levin and people like that I got to study with. And so it was a real hotbed of learning and thinking about history. And people always ask you, what would you do with a liberal arts education? And why didn't you study business? I use my history degree every single day. It took me, you talked earlier about this idea that you learn a language, you connect with people. Learning their history is at least as important in a lot of ways. So when I first started out right after Amherst working in Zambia, I knew a lot about Zambia. And I had taken the time to learn about Zambia and how they became, how the country had developed, what their issues were at independence, what their challenges were in the present. I worked for a group called Africare and then MSF, and I found that your willingness to put yourself out there and learn about other people's, what has gone on in their past really matters to them in their present.
Well, and you know what? It's not even rocket science. I came to the States to be executive director of JC's International, which is it's a global leadership development nonprofit, and we mandated to have everybody study before going to a country and whatnot. Just because, wouldn't you want to?
Sure, of course. And, I get it completely, and I think it's sometimes a real miss from people from the global north. North Americans and Europeans oftentimes just come with a boatload of assumptions about the places that they're going if they're outside of those areas. And it's important to be a traveler, but it's also important to try to be a good traveler.
100%, and a respectful one is also nice. To do that too. We found Fifth Element on the basis that leaders in their businesses can do much better when they're doing good at the same time. I mean, you clearly are doing that. You're helping, business, and you're at the intersection of economic development, new markets, social value. Can you describe how Agromoville, now do you say it Agromoville or Agromoville, or how do you say it?
Agromoville. We get different people in different countries say it. It's obviously the idea of connecting your mobile or mobility with agriculture.
The reason I say that is we were talking about a comedian earlier, this guy from France, and he said the Americans. I was speaking to one, and I said I went on my vacation, and the guy said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I went on my vacation." And he didn't understand me. And when finally he said, "Oh, your vacation," I said, "That's what I said, my vacation." And so I'm sure there's different ways to say it.
Sure. So I've always done this kind of mix of business and trying to marry it with social value. And when I left the World Bank, I started up a firm that did that, work with big multinationals to try to help them to take all of the time and effort they were spending on trying to develop community outreach kinds of things and make it into a real part of their business, right? So Agromobile got started basically out of work that I had done with that consulting firm, where, I've spent the better part of my adult life working in different parts of the world where oftentimes you will come across this same image. Small farmers sitting by the side of the road, big bag of stuff. You see it in rural Canada just as much, right? Where people are trying to get into the marketplace. And I remember Agromobile got started as a result of two conversations. One was with small farmers in Nigeria on the road outside of Abuja. I was there for some work on a road safety project and sat down and talked with these small farmers, and they all had new, cell phones, not necessarily these kinds, but they all had new cell phones, and they were all really excited about what that could bring them in the future. And trucks whizzing by, markets in the distance, there was no visibility between them. And I thought about it, and I said, wow, this has got to be an opportunity. This was about 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago. So prior to that, not really. There wasn't enough connectivity. There wasn't enough knowledge of how the technology might be used. But now they're in this moment. Simultaneous to that, or right afterwards, I came back to my old office and sat down with the group that we had, and we did a visioning exercise and said, okay, what are the 4 most important issues facing humanity in the next 20 years? We should all be working on that, right? And so on my list were food security, employment, climate, and forced migration. And all of that rolled up into small farming. And we looked at it, and we looked at the incredible losses, around $350 billion a year being lost by small farmers. A lot of it is goods that are produced and pulled out of the ground and never even sold.
Right.
And so looked at this and said, there's got to be something that we can do. And I think, honestly, Mark, partly because I am not an expert in the space, I didn't know enough to be daunted by it. We just got going. And 4 years later, Agromobile is up and running, connecting small farmers with markets in Colombia, Tanzania, Ghana, and expanding around the world.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant, and it shows how interconnected those areas you're talking about now. They're all totally connected, and it's a great story about sitting down and talking to that farmer and getting from. It reminds me of executives I worked with in companies, especially years back, where they didn't even have the operations guy or the head of the warehouse on the management committee, and like they were making decisions on stuff without talking to them. Made no sense. What was the challenge of the pandemic, and chat a little bit about what you see the food insecurity urgencies are.
Sure. Well, I mean, the pandemic was a very formative experience for all of us, right? Yeah. But it really did 2 or 3 very interesting things, and I have a kind of a cool story to explain one of them. So obviously, it forced us to think about business a lot differently. It forced us to evaluate supply chains and our vulnerabilities in supply chains and things like that. Mm-hmm. It forced a lot of countries to think about whether they could produce more locally and connect more with their neighbors, as opposed to necessarily with very, very distant places. It also got people thinking a lot about the way that they learn, about the way that they do things. And we started, I'll give you a couple great examples of how it affected us. One was, I'm in a meeting one day at the U.S. Department of Agriculture with a new contact of mine. We're sitting and talking. I'm explaining what we're doing. He says, "This is great. I really think it's wonderful. I'd like to bring you in front of more people. Can you come back next week?" And I said, "Sure, of course." And next week never happened because it was COVID, right? Literally, next week was closed. Next week had been canceled. So I did what everybody else did. I got myself a Zoom account and I set it up. And he said, "Oh, that's great. I hope you don't mind. I invited a bunch more people." There were 45 different people from USDA and USAID on the call, and it was amazing.
Which couldn't have maybe happened before, right?
Couldn't have happened, exactly. And so that was very, very, that was an interesting thing. It ended up getting us to work in Tanzania because there were things that were programmed that didn't happen. So people had some additional resources. We had a good idea. We were very fortunate in that we already had a team that was virtual. We have people in Colombia, we have people in Silicon Valley, we have people in we didn't yet then, but we had partners in Tanzania. And so for us, operating, in terms of operations, it wasn't that big a challenge. It did change something that we were planning to try to do a pilot in 2020 in Colombia, and we ended up launching it. And it was a fascinating thing because it kind of proved the model that we were hoping to, which was, if you can't be there talking with people in person, can they get your technology? Does this matter to them? Is this viable financially as a company? And people totally took a shine to it. We put in one very short period of time, about 4 months, we put up more than 1,000 farms. We had 150 communities, users 17 to 71, 500 tons of goods put on the platform. And it had to happen virtually because it had to happen virtually. Everything happened virtually, right? So that was very, very exciting. And I mean, obviously there were also some really other neat things that happened. I taught myself how to play the bass. I got to spend a lot of time with my family, which was really great because I had, like you, traveled a lot. And so it was a nice reset. It is now nice to be back on the road and to be able to meet the people that you've seen only on those little Zoom boxes. There's no question that you need the combination of the two.
Yeah,
but I think it's a really good thing to have had that opportunity, and it really made people question the way that they do things in small ag. I mean, think of the amount of people who were doing in-person trainings. We now realized, oh yeah, I need to be able to have another option in addition to the in-person training, so that I can become more productive more quickly.
Yeah, I remember Apollo invested into the University of Arizona State, which was they were doing online education, and people were saying to us, we were doing search, that's ridiculous. That's not real education. That'll never happen. And well, here we are, never happening. And it's almost like things happen for a reason, and Mother Nature was trying to teach us something. And it's another conversation, but I had one client that really pointed it out. People used to get nervous when they were on Skype or something and a dog walked in or a kid. We really learned that you can still have serious conversations and not take ourselves so seriously at the same time, and still get stuff done. So it's interesting. The fourth industrial revolution is primarily tech, AI, VR, you name it. And the fifth one is pretty well come down to that it's humanity and what's important about that, which is part of the reason we're called Fifth Element. So we focus on the intersection of impact and talent 1,000,000%, how they come together. Can you describe, with respect to that, how Agromobile app actually works, and for whom are the partners, and then what's the result economically and social and environmental, if you will?
Sure. So and by the way, we're big fans of Fifth Element, and I just love what you guys are doing. So we are a 3-part platform. It's an app that connects buyers and sellers, so that the sellers, the small farmers, can literally do the one thing they most want to do, which is to raise their hand and say, "Here I am. I've got stuff. Please, let's make a deal." Messaging on the platform, so that allows the supply chains and allows the people who are trying to support the farmers to push out to them, whether it's demand notices, whether it's information on how to be a better farmer, and then back-end analytics. So all of the big organizations that are trying to pull product or who are trying to support farmers at scale can see the shape of the market, to see what's being produced, where it's being produced, en grande, so that they can look at it and they can see the trends, and they can see how, for example, they can target women or youth or particular regions of a country or particular supply chains. And the kind of, in terms of the innovation, I think the biggest innovation one of the biggest innovations that we have is that an awful lot of the people who are trying to help small farmers and trying to work with them, trying to make money working with them, have struggled in the past because either the platforms they were working with were way too complex for the farmers, or because they were relying on pulling information from the edge, right? So you've got a big supply chain. We're working with Guinness in Ghana, right? And they are, like most supply chains, were trying to pull information about what was coming in, pull information about the farmer and what the farmer needs. And what we did is we sat down Imagine sitting in those little white plastic chairs in circles in schools and community centers in different rural areas in Latin America and Africa. We just sat down with people and talked with them about this, and they said, we want to take an action. We're not making any money. We're not seen by the market. So we said, great, let's make the first action be something that you do, where you raise your hand, where you signal the marketplace. What do you have? When's it going to be available? So you can say, I've got something that's going to be available in two weeks, or you could say, I'm planning it now to be ready in 3 months. And to get the data flowing from the edge means that people can be participants in more sophisticated, more high value conversations, right? So if 98% of all of the farmers on Earth currently are off the data map, it means they're just not viable as partners for big companies and and exporters and supermarket chains and things like that. So we wanted to get that thing. Think about it almost like a Google setup, where you make it easy for the farmer. You make it a simple value proposition so that they can say, yeah, that the one thing I most want to do is to get my stuff sold, and make the on-ramp so obvious and so simple. There's a reason why you don't Yahoo something. If you've ever looked at their homepage, you want to be just like a Google or an Uber, in the sense that it's very, very obvious, very simple for people at scale to adopt, and for them to explain to each other, to their friends, their communities. And it's working.
No, I love it. And I can foresee, and it's going to be exciting. We're doing this 100 billion meal challenge with Forbes, with Tony Robbins and others, and people are coming in, and there's going to be a public launch coming up in the next months. We're bringing together corporates, including innovators like yourself, with nonprofits, with government, family offices, high net worth leaders, et cetera, to actually transform the ecosystem, which is basically what you're doing. Not basically, but it is what you're doing. And what do you see ahead as the potential to scale globally? And with your technology, how can we all partner to make it a faster timeline to bring to farmers in every continent? And I think I took this quote from you: changing small agriculture at scale, putting more food more efficiently on the tables of a hungry world.
Yeah. So first of all, we would love to play a role in the 100 billion meals challenge. I think it's a wonderful idea. The only way we're going to address all of these issues is at scale. We're trying to do this on too small a scale. So the only way you get to scale is by making it super easy for people to self-nominate. Because when it comes down to it, the person who has the most at stake really is the person at the end of the road, right? We don't see it as a last mile challenge. We see it as a first mile opportunity to get people lit up at the end. So what's going to happen? Well, a couple of things. First of all, we know for sure that even if we had enough food and we could distribute it all well, we still have 1.5 billion people in these small farm ecosystems. And so small farming is and is going to stay a major contributor to employment and to income around the world. So we got to make it more successful. We also know that with the war against Ukraine and high oil prices and things like this, conditions for farmers are not getting easier, they're getting harder, right? So what do we want to do? We want to make sure that people have that opportunity by getting them visible in the system. We want to make sure that nothing is wasted, nothing. Right? If a third, God bless Rockefeller, they're spending, $5 billion a year to help people raise yield. But if a third of all the stuff that is, that is being planted doesn't make it to market yet, then we've got a lot we can do even before we worry about raising the amount of yield. I think that there are, think about the fast growing cities of the global South and the fast growing cities, frankly, in the global North. There's a lot of urban growth. We're not, the countryside's going to need to supply for most of that. You've also got a lot of poor, oftentimes communities of color or disadvantaged groups who are in the farming sector. And, given all of the things that we've said about our social commitments, all the things that we've said about trying to create justice at the edge and throughout our societies, and the fact that, people as young as my kids who are 10 and 13 care about where the food comes from, right? Yep. I think that there's real opportunities for a sea change. The other thing about it is that if you think about it, 10 years ago, when you said, I'm going to do work that's based off of a cell phone in Africa, people would have laughed at you, right? Now there's a cell phone for every man, woman, and child in Nigeria, plus. 3 years from now, mark my word, there will be no dumb phones. There will only be smartphones, and people will be enabled. And in order to make good use of that technology, we need to connect it to things that are really, truly life or death, not that are optional, not that are, Facebook-y kinds of things that are going to really matter.
Right.
We can make a dent in environment. We can make a dent. We can get power into the hands of women by getting them, connected to markets. And we could do so much. And there's a crazy amount of trapped economic value in this small farm ecosystem. I think this is a great way that we can both shape the future in a positive sense and also, make some good money doing it.
Yeah, I and we agree 1,000,000%, and it addresses everything from, we talked about culture and languages and everything. It addresses everything from diversity, from total inclusivity of people all over the place. It also addresses the basics of community when you're growing stuff in your own community and coming together. And I think that's kind of what Mother Nature was trying to slap us in the head for here. I think is all this stuff's here for us. If you can combine the technology that we're letting your brain know about, if you will, we can really make an impact.
Well, we believe very much, we are resolutely pro-farmer. We believe very much that the only way to reach farmers is through their community, through their cooperatives, their associations, their supply chain. So to work with existing trust engines, right? And to be a source of creating more trust. Oftentimes you watch what's going on in the technology world, and people actually feel poorer for it a lot of the time. They feel that they're being used and abused and stuff. We want to be in exactly the opposite way, where we're in the opposite vein, where we're unlocking value for people, and we're giving people who are at the edge of technology the chance to participate on their own terms, take their own actions. I think it's I think it's a real opportunity for some sea change. 5 years ago wasn't possible. 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, "Oh my God, how much have we changed?" And probably for the better. I really think so.
And it will attract the younger people to it that don't want to go into farming right now.
So it's a big issue. Average age of a farmer, according to the different statistics I've read, United States about 58, Uganda somewhat similar, Colombia somewhat similar, right?
Yep.
But we have on our platform somewhere around 30% of all the people are farmers between the ages of 25 and 35. So we're getting a really nice chunk of those folks interested. That's going to be crucial to getting people to go into farming and stay in farming. Two things: number one, that they feel connected, and number two, that they're making enough money that they can actually make it a real career. We've had a lot of conversations with older farmers who said, "Yeah, I told my kids, don't do this. It's a fool's errand. It won't work." Sure. And so we want to change that dynamic, because that doesn't need to be the case.
Yeah, 100%. It's so exciting that there is opportunity to change the ecosystem, and I'm so looking forward to working with you. And I guess, like we say in LA, we always leave them wanting more, so we could do a sequel because there's so much more to talk about. But I do have one more question on this part. In the year 2021, I learned most of the stuff I learned is from other people. I'm not smart enough to figure it out myself, so I learned from other people. And one client told me in 2021, he said, Mark, the year 2020, it flew by slowly. And when I first heard that, I thought, I don't know if you call that an oxymoron or whatever you call it, but it was interesting. And it seems like 2020 was yesterday. It also seems like it was eons ago at the same time. And with all that said, in the last few years, what are you most grateful for? And what are you most hopeful for?
I think in some ways the answer might be the same. I'm most grateful for my boys, and I'm probably I'm most appreciative of it. I'm most hopeful for them. I think that the world is going in an interesting direction, and if we keep our head on, there are going to be a lot of great opportunities. In terms of, I think, we're at a point, they often say, don't let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
And I think we are at a crisis point in a number of different areas around food, around the way that we organize politically, around the way that we speak to each other and we try to engage with each other. I think that this is a real inflection point for the world. It's on us, but a lot of the things that I see is that historically we've been pretty good at leaving each other alone. But I think what's happened over the last say 10 years or so, especially with the advent of new technology, is we've kind of come a little unglued. We've stopped seeing how much we need each other. We've stopped seeing how much we get from our work together and from our community. And I am very hopeful that with a little bit of creativity and perhaps just a little bit less caffeine, we can move on to another level where, yeah, we can keep working just as hard, but we can work with more purpose, and we can work with more in common, with more of a it's almost with a slightly different mindset. We're working with too short a time horizon now. And I think one of the things that can come out of this period, if we're lucky and if we are creative enough, is that we start to say, okay, yeah, it's important what's happening to me in this moment, but it's important what I leave to my kids. It's important what I leave to my community. And it's important to recognize how much I've gotten from my community. You know, we live in a bit of an era of complaint. That's okay. It's important to recognize what isn't going right, but it's also important to really think hard about the opportunities we have for service and just to make things better.
It's almost, yeah, so well said. It's almost circling back to, you know, why can't we play together and still make that an economically viable thing too? And it will be more economically. You know, when players win championships in sports, the money isn't the motivator for the championship that they make. It's the winning with the team doing something, accomplishing something. It doesn't matter if they're making $1 or a gazillion dollars for the championship to win. And what was it that Maya Angelou said? It's the most important thing is people always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah. I think that's really true. And it's very inspiring. We have an amazing team. We're about half men, half women. We have a lot of young people on our team, and it's so great when we sit and have our weekly meetings and people are reporting in the things that they're doing, and you could tell in their voice they're really jazzed about it. All of them are way smart, and they could work for anybody, right? And the fact that they've chosen to work on this effort in this way, it's a real honor. And I must say, it keeps me energized. I've been doing it for 4 years, and I couldn't be happier with it.
I wonder, how do you keep your hair though? Because I don't know, it's having like.
I don't know. It started going away, and then it just stopped. So I'm counting my blessings. Right.
Well, last thing I'm going to say to congratulate you on everything you're doing, and I think there's a big future. But also what you just said about how they're embracing it and excited about it. One thing that we've noticed in our conversations is, you know, people's husbands, spouses, partners, when they go home, you want to talk about sustainability. When they go home, they either say, man, I'm exhausted, work sucked, give me a beer, I'm going to sit on the sofa, whatever. And the kids hear it. Or you go home and they say, we got to sit down. You got to hear what happened today and what we're doing. And that's how you sustain, in my opinion, the next level of going. It's not the only thing you have to do, obviously, but that makes a big difference. Because if they hear the other, that also makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, I mean, trying to create change is hard work. Mm-hmm. And I know that our kids see that. They see the hard work and they see the frustration. It's not a straight line. It is definitely not. Certainly it would be a lot easier if we had more gas in the tank. So if people in your ecosystem want to help us get to scale, boy, I would love to have that conversation. But the truth is that if you know you're on the right track, and I really think we are. I think our model is right. I think that we've solved a tremendous number of problems. You know, being able to train people at scale and getting people excited about it. I think that's the best example you could possibly give to the next generation. And they see us working hard to try and make things better. You know, that's what I learned from my dad. I'm pretty happy about it.
And you can enjoy that journey. So hey, listen, I'm grateful that you are a leader who cares. And I'm hopeful because you are a leader who cares. So I'll do that same thing you did. And hey, there'll be more to talk about, but thanks so much for being on the series. Really appreciate it.
A lot of fun. Thanks, Mark.
Sure.